Okay, well, we're going to get underway. And so, welcome to Jane Sauter and Spencer Hutchins. And tonight we don't have Mark Sauter here, no relation apparently that we know of. And he informed me yesterday that he would not be coming. So he had a conflict, and that just take that for what it's worth. And so the legislature is the lawmaking branch of our republic, and these folks are hopefully going to help us tonight to know who to vote for and why we should do that. So with that, they each get up to 8 minutes to open, and whoever would like to open first can have the floor.
First. Good evening. My name is Jane Sauter, and Steve has already said I'm not related at all to Mark Sauter. This is my husband, Steve, here, and we've been married 37 years. We have 9 children and 14 grandchildren, and we just found out there's one more on the way. So, I was looking up women of the Bible, and I came across Deborah, who was a lawyer in her time. Her story in Judges 4 shows us that the Lord calls ordinary people to do extraordinary things that can only be accomplished through the Spirit. Deborah was a motherly figure. She was courageous. She was called by God to lead at a difficult time. She supported the people of God who God called to lead. She was trusted. She was direct. She was confident. She was humble. She did not have a strong personality. She did not manipulate, use strong language, or a loud voice to use her authority. Some of you may be wondering why I would want to run for state representative. I've been politically active for over 30 years. I've been a chief election judge, a poll worker, a convention delegate, and a precinct committee person, just to name some of the things I've done in the states of Minnesota, Montana, and Idaho. I will say that I'm not a politician, and I've never run for a state office before, but there's never a better time than now to step up and see if God will use me in this position. I want to just insert something here, and that is that there's this unrealistic expectation that everybody who runs for office is going to be this wonderful orator that can just put their thoughts out there and be so fluent, and that really isn't. I use notes. I've been criticized online for using notes, but I will say that when I watch the legislature and I watch people who give their testimonies and things in the legislature, they use notes. And so I'd rather use notes and be accurate than not use notes and not be accurate. So I'm just letting you know that if anybody has a problem with me using notes, I've been strongly criticized online for that for a couple of months now. So anyway, that's just the way I roll. But I just wanted to say that I am endorsed by the Bonner County Republican Central Committee, the Idaho True Conservatives, and just this morning I heard from Health Freedom Idaho that they are endorsing me as well. I met my husband Steve at Bible College. I graduated from a K through 12 Christian Academy when I graduated high school. And I went to a 2-year Bible Institute in Dallas, Texas, and I graduated in 1984 with a degree in theology. Throughout the years of rearing our children, I was involved in local politics. Our family has always been pro-life, and we also enjoy health freedom, having home birthed 8 of our 9 children, and our children are unvaxxed except for our oldest daughter, who had a few baby shots at the very beginning because somebody called me from a hospital and I was a new mom, so I just took her down there and she got some shots, but she got very ill, and we just decided then that it was not right for our family. So our children are all, except for the oldest two, had a couple of shots, but other than that, we chose not to immunize. And I'm also all about like people who want to be in charge of their own health. We do have a small business that is health related, and we are always trying to help people take charge of their own health. So that's really important to us. I do just want to let you know what sets me apart from the other candidates. I do have these 2024 Idaho Freedom Indexes in the back. There's a few back there on my table, and you can help yourself to those, but that will help you to know the voting records of the current legislators. I also want to just mention that what sets me apart from this opponent is 3 things. He did attempt to oust Scott Herndon from his chairman position, and also has a close friend who will be running against Scott in the general election if Scott wins the primary. He was also voted out of the Bonner County Republican Central Committee for not doing the job of treasurer in a satisfactory way. I have a document with me here that lists the significant discrepancies of his bookkeeping skills. What concerns me is that he has not been able to do the treasurer job of the Bonner County Central Committee, and yet he's wanting to handle millions, if not billions of dollars for the state. He also creates drama and division in true conservative circles, and he especially treats women with disrespect and disdain. Mark Sauter's voting record speaks volumes. You can look it all up from his last 2 years in office. Some of the issues of Mark's and some of his voting record is on my mailer in the back. Christians respect order, form, and structure. We like order, and we love liberty. I am a Christian conservative, and I care about North Idaho, and that is why I am running. Thank you.
Good to go.
Okay, I'm Spencer Hutchings. I'm a former Marine, business owner. I own a gun store down in Sagal, and so much for no personal attacks, huh? So if you want to know what's going on down in Bonner County, I don't know, you guys have probably seen a little bit of the chaos with the Bonner County Republican Central Committee. Basically what happened with the Bonner County Republican Central Committee is it was taken over from the inside by a group that call themselves the politically active Christians that are anything but politically active Christians. It's basically a bunch of very well-meaning good people who have been manipulated. And they have put those people into positions in the Bonner County Republican Central Committee, and everybody knows Heather Scott, right? So these people basically went in and replaced all of the really conservative people that Heather Scott got in there. And I was one of those people. And she's referring to somebody running against Scott Herndon. Well, there was a plan put in place that in case Scott lost to Woodward, we would have somebody else to run in his place. So one of the Central Committee members, who was a Heather Scott supporter, dropped out of the Republican Party, registered as an independent, and he put in to run against Woodward. Should Woodward win, he's not going to run against Scott. So that's a fallacy. So let's just clear that up. What else was in there? Oh, treasurer stuff. The people that ran the Bonner County Republican Lincoln Day, I was trying not to say anything about this because it's not a good thing to say for Scott's purposes, but for Scott Herndon. Some of the information as treasurer, does anybody know how you do your reports on the 10th of the month? And if you don't do your reports on the 10th of the month, you get in trouble, right? So when they did the Lincoln Day dinner, they purposely withheld information from me until after the 10th of the month so I couldn't submit the report. So I don't know why that was done, but it was done. I have documentation to prove that. And I withheld that information because I didn't want to damage Scott's reputation. And yes, I did ask Scott to step down as chairman of the Central Committee, and I didn't do it on my own. Guess who helped me try and have Scott step down as treasurer, or as chairman? His wife, Arlene. Arlene and I talked to Scott, and we tried to get him to step down as chairman because it was interfering with his duties as a senator. And Scott didn't take that well, and that's when they started coming up with a reason to get rid of me off the Central Committee. So all that aside, there's no bad blood between Scott and I. I love him deeply. I think he does a great job. But water under the bridge, we work together just fine. So about me, what am I going to do? I'm going to try and represent you guys in the best way possible to lower your taxes, make the government smaller, and increase your freedom and increase your liberty. That's why I'm running for this office. There's really nothing that I would like to see more than for nobody to have to pay property taxes in Idaho again. I'd like to see us eliminate the property tax burden in Idaho. I think having property taxes in Idaho is ridiculous. We have plenty of natural resources that can be used, not exploited, but used, that would offset the tax burden. We can also offset the tax burden for property taxes by increasing the sales tax. We don't have to have a property tax in Idaho. So that's one of the things I want to try and do. And another part of that would be making your taxes simpler. The tax code in Idaho is fairly complicated. Does anybody in here know how much they actually pay in taxes every year? I mean, unless you're an accountant, you probably don't know. Most people don't know. Grocery tax, gas tax, property tax, income tax. By the time you add all that stuff up, a lot of us are paying upwards of 50% in taxes. So the point of making the tax code simpler for people is so that we know how much we're actually paying. And then we can hopefully get to a point where we know where the money's going. We know what they're spending it on. I don't think anybody here could tell me where their money goes when they put their tax money in. I mean, it just goes into a black hole and then it gets distributed out. A lot of the stuff that it gets distributed out to are the 190 departments in the state of Idaho's government now. We have a barley council, a wheat council, a potato council, a grape council. We have all these different groups that advocate for various businesses that they really shouldn't be doing. It's not really a function of the state government, or shouldn't be a function of the state government. If we're going to advocate for all those, then just pick any other thing that we should be advocating for. You know, in Bonner County, they have a lighthouse salad dressing. You know, maybe we should have a salad dressing council and advocate for those guys too. You know, it's ridiculous that we advocate for all these groups, and we pay for these advocacy groups. We pay for employee salaries for these things. And average salary for these government workers, anybody know? Some of you know, some of you have heard this before. 100 grand. You know, average salary for a government worker in Idaho is about 100 grand. And what's average income for citizens in Idaho? For the population, it's about 50. So here we are making, 50 grand a year, paying people making 100 grand a year, and we're paying them to spend our money. One of the great things they like to do is take our money and pass it off to their buddies. And they found a new way to do that this year, where they signed the launch program into law. Anybody know what the launch program is? You guys heard of that? Launch program? Yeah, it's $8,500, $8,500 per student that graduates high school to get them into some kind of trade school so that they can learn how to be a good worker for a corporation. Well, the corporations got together and gave donations to the governor and to a few select congressmen or House representatives and senators, and they got them to put this bill forward where they're going to take our tax dollars and they're going to train their employees. They're going to use our money to train their employees. And not just take our money and use it to train their employees, but they're going to have a new department in the government. So there's another department in the government. There's 20 employees. There's about $2 million in salaries in that department. So what's that? 100 grand a piece for them to give away our money, $8,500 a pop. So I don't think that that's a good way to use our money. They complain about, I was just on a radio show this morning where they were talking about, the schools are falling apart. Well, maybe they could take the $90 million that they're using in the launch program and fix some of the schools. And I'm sure a lot of the people in here went to a school where you had just the prefab buildings, like a mobile home basically. Was your education any worse because you were in a prefab building? I mean, it's the teacher, right? It's the curriculum, right? It's not the building that you're in. And we build, basically, they take our tax dollars and build what amounts to palaces these days in a lot of these places. I haven't been to a school up here. I don't know how your schools are up here. Fall apart. So you guys could use some work up here, but I'm sure all the money that you guys pay in taxes that's supposed to go to buildings ends up in Ada instead of up here, which that should be addressed also. That money should be distributed evenly. And speaking of schools, parents should be able to choose where their money is spent for their kid. If you're spending 10 grand a piece for a child to go to school every year, the parents should get to choose where that money is spent. If you have a failing school that your kid is in, you should be able to take your money and use it to send them to another school, a Christian school or whatever kind of school you want to send them to. And there shouldn't be any strings attached to that money, other than they're going to get an education. They shouldn't be able to tell you can't send them to a Christian school or you can't send them to this or that kind of school. You should be able to choose what works for your kid. And I don't know about all you guys, but I was one of those 10% kids that the school didn't really work for me. And I was that one kid in the class that the teacher always had the problem with because I just was bored all the time. So schools didn't really work for me. So I ended up going to some private schools here and there just to finish out the school year when I wasn't doing so good in the public school. I guess that's it. He says I got a minute left, but that's fine. We can take questions.
Okay, well, since you have the...
Yeah, go ahead.
Since you have the floor, do you support the repeal of the grocery tax?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I support the repeal of a lot of taxes, but there's a trick, isn't there? When they repeal a tax, if they're not reducing something in the government, when they repeal that tax, the tax isn't really being repealed. So if they tell you they're going to take away the grocery tax, but they don't tell you, hey, we're going to eliminate this department or we're going to cut this budget, then they're not really eliminating that tax. So yeah, I'm all for eliminating it, but I would rather see, or I would also like to see what they're going to cut in the government when they eliminate that tax. Because otherwise it's just a lie, it's just a shell game. And that's what they've been doing to us forever, right? They tell us they're reducing something, but somehow our tax burden always seems to go up, right?
Jane, you want to take on the same question?
I do support repealing the grocery tax. Yes, it comes up every 2 years and nothing seems to ever get accomplished with it, but I would support it if it would be actually repealed.
Okay, and he made a point about how if you don't cut government, it's filled in.
Right,
So
you tighten something, you carve it off or you eliminate something, but you can't just say, we repealed it. It would save them a lot of bookwork too, because they end up giving refunds at the end of the year anyway, so it just makes sense that they could just eliminate it.
Okay, so Jane, I'll give you the next question. Is the legislature is the lawmaking branch of our republic? What is law and what is the basis for your decision-making process when supporting or opposing legislation?
Okay, well, the lawmaking function of the legislature would be to research, write, and pass the laws, and then the governor would turn it into law. And I would most likely be in the Idaho Freedom Caucus, which is a good group of people to just cooperate with. And I would also be hearing from my constituents. So I think I would just gather information and then be able to make my decision from there.
Okay, and there's a third part of this question is how do you determine what is and what is not constitutional?
Well, I carry the Constitution and the state constitution with me all the time, so I think it would just be a matter of just making sure that it came underneath the right heading and was constitutional. And a lot of times things aren't. A lot of times things that they pass are borderline or not at all, and they still get passed. So I think it's really important to stick with the Constitution and make sure that it's correct.
Okay. Spencer, same question to you. Let me read it again.
Yeah.
Okay. The legislature is the lawmaking branch of our republic. What is law? What is the basis for your decision-making process when supporting or opposing legislation? And how do you determine what is and what is not constitutional?
Well, by understanding the Constitution and asking people who've been there for a long time that have experience, you can kind of figure out what's going to pass constitutional muster and what's not. But the main test for any of this stuff after being constitutional is what's the impact to the citizens of the state? Is it a positive or a negative impact? Is it something that we need? Because you guys all know we need more laws, right? We need a lot more laws. We need more laws. So I would lean more towards repealing laws than enacting new laws. But if we're going to pass a new one, let's make sure it's not hurting anybody, it's helping people, and make sure it's constitutional.
Okay. And if there's a response, just you want to make another response to that?
I would just say, in addition to what Spencer just said, I would say that I would make sure that anything that was passed that I voted in an affirmative way would not be something that would be growing government.
I think I already covered the growing government thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to cut it until everybody screams, and then maybe we'll increase it a little bit.
Okay. The National Education Association, the NEA, is the largest labor union in the United States and one of the largest political activist groups in America. And its agenda brings it into conflict with conservative interest groups. The NEA supports, among other liberal causes, abortion, same-sex marriage, the LGBT plus rights, and gun control. It asserts itself as nonpartisan, yet has never endorsed any Republican or third-party candidate for presidency. This is sources from Wikipedia. The public schools are the target of the NEA agenda, making them the incubator of liberal agenda socialism, both in primary and secondary institutions. The government schools consume over one-half of the total state budget, and the Boundary County budget is $22 million with 1,350 students, which is $16,000 per student per year. Representative Mark Sauter on his webpage under Education states, in part, the framers of the Constitution noted the stability of a Republican form of government depends on mainly upon the intelligence of the people. Our public school system is one of our greatest assets. Simply stated, our graduates are our future. If we believe in the power and value of each individual Idahoan, we must do our best to support their education. I support the efforts to improve our children's education from kindergarten through university. What is your position on that, Spencer?
That's quite a statement there. Well, the NEA, I don't know, I think these organizations that just push leftist stuff are evil. I think that they're powered by union money, and I think having union employees in government should be illegal. I mean, government employees shouldn't be allowed to be part of a union. This is what happens when they are part of a union. They take over, they wield political power, they take money from the teachers, and they use that money to do whatever they feel like they want to do with it, what the leadership wants to do with it. And I think a lot of teachers probably don't agree with it, but they do it anyways. I mean, I had teachers when I was growing up who were World War II vets, and they were really cool people to learn from, you know? I mean, they had all kinds of perspectives. We had, we kind of laugh about the art teachers and stuff, the kind of lefty type of teachers we had in school when we were younger, but, now they're kind of all like that. Or if you're not like that, and I know people who are teachers who have to hide what they are at school. They can't be their real self, because if they actually, speak the way that they want to speak, they get ostracized or fired. We can't have that. These people need to, the teachers, the whole education system needs to be gutted and redone. I mean, all the administrators should be fired and they should start over. There was a time when administrators made less than teachers. And I think we need to go back to that. I mean, some of these administrators of schools, they think they're CEOs of multi-million-dollar companies, and they're getting, $250,000 salaries to tell us, that they're going to teach our kids LGBT stuff, and that shouldn't be that way. These people have hugely inflated egos, and it needs to get back to the teachers and the curriculum, and the parents need to have as much input on that as possible.
Okay, let me clarify that. So the question is, what your position on public schools, but also, I don't know if I read the second part, but why and how much more funding should they receive? In other words, do you support more funding for the public schools?
Well, that's a simple question too that we've all heard all our lives, right? How much money does the school need? Have you ever gone to a school administrator or to anybody in the school system and said, how much money do you need? What do they say?
More,
right? They'll never give you a number. They say more, whatever. It doesn't matter how much we give them, the answer is always more. And we have to stop letting them do that. You just said they're spending like 50% of the budget. And what are the results? A 40% literacy rate among our graduates? 40%? Are you kidding me? We have kids that graduate school that can't point to Canada on a map. And it's right there. We have kids that can't point to they can't even tell you where Africa is on the globe. You show them a globe, they can't point to it. The school system is broken. The best part of the school system is you can take your kid out and homeschool.
All right, so I take from that you wouldn't support an increase in the funding of public schools?
No.
Okay. Go ahead. Jane.
Well, I do think, if I can answer it backwards a little bit, I think that the funding for the school upkeep in buildings needs to come from the state, and that they don't need to keep doing levies to add to the burden already. If they could actually put that into the budget where they actually help maintain, I don't know how it would work with brand new buildings, but as far as maintaining, it's really a burden because they always have to find the funds from somewhere else. So I think the state should provide for that. But if it's $16,000 per child, that's just up from, I don't know, I guess maybe 8 years ago or so, it was about $7,000 per child. So it's really gone up in the last 8 to 10 years. But I mean, $16,000 per child is more than we, in our child-rearing years, made in a year. And we homeschool anywhere from 4 to 9 children on that income. And so that just blows my mind that $16,000 per child. And yes, I would want that to go to the parents that could educate their child at home, or private education, or Christian education, but I would only have done it if there were no strings attached, and usually there are strings attached. So I did talk with one of our school board members in the LPOSD school system, and he did go into the superintendent salary. The superintendent in LPOSD is making roughly $160,000 a year, and that's pretty common across the board for Idaho. And this board member felt like our administrator in LPOSD was doing a very good job at that salary. So I do, as far as all the curriculum and all the added social burdens on children. Recently I was at a gathering where I was with a women's gathering, but in the same facility was a kids choir from a high school. And the kids decided that at the meal they were going to sing for us after the dinner was over, because we all ate in the same cafeteria. Now these kids got up and circled the entire dining room, and it almost made me cry, because there were, in that circle of maybe 75 kids, there were kids holding stuffed animals, and these were 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. They were holding stuffed animals. They were wearing their pajamas. There were boys in various stages of becoming girls. There were girls in various stages of becoming boys. It was the craziest mixture of teenagers I had ever seen and I've seen a lot of kids in my life, but I had never seen anything that messed up. So that's where our curriculum is failing us. And this board member I spoke with in Bonner County at LPOSD said that our curriculum had, the K-6 curriculum had an oversight committee who looked into the curriculum, just looking for critical race theory elements, and they found them in multiple books, but they actually pulled 2 books from their curriculum because they were so full of critical race theory. Everybody knows what critical race theory is, right? So, and they also noticed a tremendous amount of, in the 2nd grade curriculum, a tremendous amount of natural disaster knowledge, which for 2nd graders, that's an awful lot to put on a 2nd grader. They're sweet, they're young, they're just sweet. And they're getting all this pummeling of these natural disasters. Potentially, the thought was that they're trying to make climate change activists out of them. So there's a lot of things that are wrong with the public system. I would like to see those things corrected. I would even be willing to serve on the education committee if I were elected. Excuse me. Because I think it's really important that we start to get back to basics and we get rid of all this social engineering stuff.
So, do you support more funding for the public schools or less funding for the public schools?
I would say less, and I would also say that I think that they need competition, because I think competition will cause them to raise the bar on their standards. So if they know that they're not going to get that money unless they raise their standards, people already are. Since COVID, people have been taking their kids out by the, I don't know if I should say the thousands, but there's a lot of kids that are at home now that never were before, but their parents saw the need then, and then they were like, no, this isn't so hard, I think we'll go ahead and do this. And it comes at a high personal cost because they're not getting reimbursed for it. So I have experience with that because we over the years have spent tens of thousands of dollars on our kids' education, and I would do it again if I had to, and spend my own money to get them educated correctly.
Okay, well, Jane, you get the next question.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
So something that never gets brought up, you're saying that the schools are falling apart. Well, why would a school fall apart? Because they never thought about it because they never did any future planning. You know, down in Bonner, I was talking to one of the road and bridge guys, and it blew me away. They said they had, I don't know, 700 or something culverts in the county. And I said, well, what's the replacement schedule? Because they had one big one that collapsed. And it's like, it was a big surprise to them that it collapsed, and it had been there for 25 years. And it was past its replacement time, right? Well, no planning means that you're gonna have emergencies, and then you're gonna have to fix something, and it's gonna be a big deal, right? Well, all these schools, no school should be ever falling apart. We should have them on a schedule. You know, if it's 50 years or 25 years or whatever it is, there should be a schedule for this stuff. And that's also why our taxes are always so random and why they're always asking for more money at random times, because nobody plans anything. It's all just emergency after emergency after emergency.
You want to make another comment on that? Okay. All right, so this year the legislature passed and signed into law limiting access of adult content in the public libraries. What is your position on the limiting of certain public materials in the library? And also, do you know how Mark Sauter voted on this?
Yes, I do. Mark actually voted twice. He voted down one of the original bills, the library bill. I believe it was the one that was the best one. But then when the legislature tried to override it, he also would not vote to override the governor's veto. So twice he did that. But I'm fully in support of protecting children. And there's a lot of talk about protecting the librarians or protecting the schools, but they don't really talk about the damage being done to children. And even in that time frame from when they didn't override the governor's veto and had no bill in place, there were kids being exposed to these materials. So I really feel like it's serious what you put before a child when they're in their formative years, when they're seeing these things. They can't unsee it. Once they see it, it can affect their heart and their soul. And so it's important to me that those things be pulled from those shelves. I know they scream book banning, book burning, all of that, but I don't care. I think it has to be about the children. It can't just be about lawsuits and money and insurance. It has to be about the children.
So you can take any kind of, I don't know, if I put a label on it, I guess the liberals would call it censorship if you try to take these books out of the library. We all know it's not censorship because we all know that a lot of these books they don't want to take out of the library, that if we took it to work and we showed it to a coworker, we'd get fired for it because the books are really bad. If you've seen any of these things, first of all, I'm sorry you had to look at it, but a lot of us did have to look at it so we would know how bad it was and what they were putting in front of our kids. I can't remember which senator it was, but one of the senators, towards the end of the session, he had his 12-year-old kid check one of these books out, and then he asked the speaker if he could read it in the chambers. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead and read it. Yeah, he made it about a sentence and a half into it, and they told him he had to stop, you know, because it's so bad. So we can't be exposing our kids to this stuff, but at the same time, we've got to be careful on how they write the laws, because next thing you know, they'll be banning the Old Testament in the libraries because they say it's, you know, too harsh for a kid to read. So we just have to make sure that there's some sort of common sense to it. I don't know, I would like to think we could trust the librarians to say, oh, this is for the adults, this isn't for the kids. But, you know, when we get these leftists in these positions, they want to show the kids this stuff. You know, they're purposely doing this. That's how the stuff got in there. That's why they're writing these books and publishing these books and giving them to the libraries. They want the kids to see it. So we've got to be able to have the library board people or whoever's hiring and firing the actual librarians that are choosing the books, we've got to have them, they must have the power to fire the librarians who are not doing their job and keeping the stuff away from kids. You know, if you're not keeping the stuff away from kids, hey, you're not doing your job, you're out of here, let's get another one and see if we can get somebody that knows what they're doing.
Thomas Jefferson, writing about the judicial branch of government, stated, this member of government, the judicial branch, was at first considered the most harmless and helpless of all organs. But it is proven that the power of declaring what is law by sapping and mining shyly without alarm the foundations of our Constitution can do what open force could not dare to attempt. In 2018, the Idaho U.S. Court ordered the state of Idaho vital statistics to issue birth certificates to transgender people that change their sex and name as original birth certificates and must not include any record of amendments to that. In 2020, the same court reinforced its ruling. Case number is 117CV00170. Is it a constitutional right for a transgender to have an original birth certificate altered to reflect their new gender and names? What's your opinion on that?
I don't remember reading that in the Constitution anywhere. I'm really against all this transgender stuff. I used to build hospitals. I used to be in the medical industry, so I know what's driving all this stuff, and it's just money. They're making about $1 million a kid for this stuff. The drug companies, they've got them on drugs for the rest of their life, and they're expensive drugs, and a lot of them, they're getting us to pay for it. But that stuff is insanity. The doctors doing those surgeries should be in jail. Those people don't need surgery, they need mental help. We really need, I would pay for mental help for somebody that wants to cut their bits off. If I told you I wanted to cut my arm off, you'd tell me I'm crazy, and you'd take me to a doctor, a psychologist, not somebody to cut my arm off. And these people are no different. They need help. They don't need a scalpel, they need a therapist.
Jane, you wanna?
Well, the word transgender, there was a time when it was not in the dictionary. So I went home and I said that at something like this, and I thought, I gotta go look through all my dictionaries. So I did, and I couldn't find the word transgender. So I don't know when they actually coined that word, but I do think this is greed-driven, and it is pure evil. And I think that to perpetrate it on the most innocent people of our society there's no words. Because these kids are made in the image of God, and this is like a last-ditch effort. They can't do anything else but just mess up people and try to make them go to the other gender, because at least it's some way for them to make money. So I'm completely against anything transgender related, and I would support any kind of legislation that would. Well, there already is we had a big victory this last year in not having the surgeries paid for by tax dollars anymore, or the medications, or the treatments. So that was a win.
Comment?
Yeah, they're really taking advantage of the drug companies are really taking advantage of people that are being propagandized to. They're propagandizing to these families, these poor families. I don't know what you would have to do to convince me that my kid needs to stop their puberty and take a drug. And they have propagandized these people to the point where they think that they can pause their puberty and then start it again when they make up their mind what they want to be. It's a complete lie. As soon as they start giving those kids those drugs, the kid is wrecked. They're wrecking their sex organs. There's no fixing it. And it's all money. It's disgusting.
All right, Jane, this is a follow-up, somewhat attached to that, but though intended for justice, the court system has become in many ways a path to further wrongs. This case, as well as others, deal with this federal government telling Idaho what law is, or what Idaho should do is what's right and what's wrong. With little exceptions, the courts are slow, expensive, and exclusionary to the citizens. Instead of a place of justice, it's in many become a den of thieves enriching only the lawyers. When justice is obstructed and misused, rules delaying it, if not corrupting justice, are commonplace. What can you as a legislature do to correct the problems with that branch of government?
I think part of the reason that we have a problem like that is because as a state, we're taking federal funds. And when you're taking their money, which we all know is not, most of it's not even real money, it's fiat money, but when you take that money, then the state has to obey whatever strings are attached. So the first thing to do would be to not take the federal money. And I believe it's 43% of our Idaho budget is made up of federal funds. So the first thing to do would be to cut and tighten and not have such a big budget so that we wouldn't have to take those funds. So that would be my answer.
Repeat the question again? Not the whole thing, just the gist of it.
Okay. What can the Idaho legislature do to correct the federal court intrusion into state affairs? And what can the Idaho legislature do to clean up Idaho state courts?
Let's do the Idaho state courts first. Do you guys know how judges are picked? Who knows how a judge is picked in Idaho? Nobody knows? Okay. So in Idaho, when there's a vacancy for a judge, there's what's called the Judicial Council down in Boise. And the Judicial Council down in Boise, they pick 3 names of people they think would be good judges, and they give those names to the governor, and the governor picks one. But what nobody tells you is the council of judges who picks those 3 names, they're all leftists. So every judge we've been getting for about the last 20 years has been a leftist of some kind, or a conservative who's managed to hide what they really are. So that's why the court system in Idaho, you would think, we're a conservative state, we'd have conservative judges, but that's just one of those things the leftists has done where they've infiltrated another part of the government and they've corrupted another part of the government and had it working against us. That's why some of the cases that we lose, you just kind of scratch your head going, that doesn't make any sense. Why would the judge rule that way? As far as protecting us from the feds, we've got to wean ourselves off the federal money. I mean, there's just, as long as we keep accepting federal money with the strings attached, they get to boss us around as much as we let them boss us around, I guess. But that's why you hire people to go be state reps and state senators and hopefully a governor that have spines, because the compact between the states and the federal government, we're not the inferior party in that compact. We're the superior party. We gave birth to the federal government. The federal government didn't give birth to us. So we let ourselves be pushed around, and we've let ourselves be pushed around for a long time. Has anybody seen that Chris Ann Hall movie where she talks about that? There's Chris Ann Hall has a wonderful movie that she made where she tells you all about that stuff. Everybody should be required. It should be required in high school or junior high. But we let ourselves be pushed around. We need to hire legislators and governors that won't let us be pushed around, and we need to stop taking the money.
Any other comment on that? Okay, this next one is to make you aware that we have a problem of polygamy in this county, and it's a live and very real problem. So in Article 8, Section 4, actually it's Article 1, Section 4 of the State of Idaho Constitution, and it basically just outlaws polygamy, and it also outlaws any institution or group that supports polygamy. And part of the problem with polygamy is they're making money on unwed mothers that are, in fact, it appears to be multiple wives of certain people. So how can, it's your turn to think.
Yeah.
How do we deal with that, or how would you deal with that? And a little bit of background: in '96, I think it was, Idaho passed a law they would no longer recognize common law marriages. So to have a marriage, you had to have a license. So that compounded the problem, or put us where we're at now.
Well, I'm not really for the government being involved in the institution of marriage. I mean, this is where the institution of marriage belongs. It's between the two people and God. The two people, I said two people, not groups of them. I had a single mother Democrat that raised me, and we went to Mormon church, so I got to be around the Mormons. I never saw any of the polygamy stuff with them. And as I got older and people started talking about it, and they assume that you're into polygamy because you're a Mormon, I don't know. I'm not a practicing Mormon anymore. I left that stuff behind a long time ago. But it's kind of interesting that they're using it as a way to grift money out of the state or out of our pockets. And that's an ongoing thing in this county? Really?
Polygamy is, very much.
And is it a Mormon-based thing, or is it
fundamental Mormons? Fundamental Mormons.
Well, I don't know what you do with it other than investigate it, and if there's people breaking the law, if they're not supposed to be doing it, then you file charges on for theft or whatever crime they're committing. mean, I'd hate to see families getting broken up, but you can't have that stuff going on. I mean, that just makes a mess. There's a reason why it was outlawed so long ago, you know?
Right. I don't expect you necessarily to have a fix for it. I'm trying to make you aware that it's real and it's happening here.
Yeah, well, I know it happened. I didn't know it was up here. I always thought it was more south of us, you know, south of Boise. I thought that's where that stuff happened, but I didn't know it was going on up here too. What else you guys got going on up here?
Do you want to address that?
Sure. Well, I think that partly in that fundamental group, there's some trafficking going on, to be honest. But one of my sons met a girl recently here in District 1, and when they swapped stories about their families and stuff, they were just talking. She has 150 brothers and sisters. So, yeah, apparently her father is pretty high up in that fundamental group. And so, anyway, it was shocking to me. It was shocking to him. He could hardly believe it, but he thought it was shocking to have 9 or 8 siblings. So when they swapped stories, I was like, whoa, 149 siblings. But anyway, I would just keep the laws getting stronger and stronger, even if it's step by step, and making sure that we can keep that. I do believe there's quite a heavy population of them just north of the border. And so I think that's part of the problem too. It might not be right here, but it's right over the border.
Clarification was, I don't want to get into your son's life, but this girl, is she involved here in this local area, has 100 and some relatives?
I don't believe they're all here though.
Okay, but some of them are.
I really don't know how many are. Maybe it's only her. Maybe the rest of them are elsewhere.
All right, well, we're just trying to gather some.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give out any personal information.
Okay, let's see, whose turn's first here? I forget. Okay, all right, well, what's your position on, I got the wrong page. What's your position on, find it here, but it's global warming and water, power, and nuclear power.
You mean as far as global warming, as far as energy production goes? Or, well, the climate changes. I mean, it changes all the time. I mean, throughout the history that they've been able to, do core samples in the Arctic and stuff, the globe's always changing. We're actually at a fairly low amount of carbon in the atmosphere for the planet right now. Who knows when the biggest recorded spike of carbon in the atmosphere was? Does anybody know? This is awesome. It's when Genghis Khan was around. He killed so many people that the carbon content went up in the atmosphere. Killed 41 million people all at once, and it's actually, you can see it in the ice core samples. I'm all for hydroelectric power, nuclear power, coal or natural gas power. As long as it's clean and we're not destroying the atmosphere or destroying the planet. I mean, I don't want I don't want coal dust raining on people's houses. But I mean, Idaho has a really great research lab down south where they do nuclear research. And they've figured out how to do little nuclear reactors that are perfectly safe, that you could power a small city or even up to like just a little house with, and it would last basically your entire lifetime. But the leftists won't let them do it. They won't. I'm of the opinion that the left won't stop trying to rid us of ways to generate power until we're back in the Stone Ages. I mean, what's the only thing they like? They like windmills and they like solar panels, both of which are awful. They're terrible. The amount of energy used to create a windmill is never recovered. They never get that back. And what do they do with the windmills when they wear out? You guys know what they do with them? They chop them up into pieces and bury them. They can't even recycle them. The solar panels, those things are as toxic gets when they try and recycle those things. Nuclear is safer than solar panels, basically. And hydroelectric, which is what we get, I think, 85% of the power in our state from, it's awesome. That's great. We should be doing that. But what do the leftists want to do? They want to tear out the dams. They don't want the dams to be there. Oh, the fishies. We do all this stuff to make sure the fish can get back and forth down the rivers, and the leftists still want to tear the dams out. I think they're just nuts. I mean, I really do. I think they're crazy. I think it's a disease.
Okay. Do you want to?
I have to agree with Spencer on all of that. I think hydroelectric's very good, and nuclear is becoming safer and is a clean way. Absolutely, what they're trying to get into Palouse, which is to put the turbines down there. It would just be horrible if they ruined that beautiful area with those. And a lot of those, if you look, and I know this because I originally was born in Minnesota, and they have areas in Minnesota now that are covered with those turbines. And if you look at those, a lot of times they're not even turning. So, and whether they bury them or they just let them stand there and look ugly, it's terrible. So I would definitely think hydroelectric or nuclear would be the answer, and or just coal and natural resources.
What kills more eagles every year than anything else? Windmills.
All right, we have one more question, and we'll just try to keep it short. It's a big issue, and it's becoming more and more evident, and then we'll have closing statements. But the national debt is $35 trillion, and Jane, you'll have to address to you first. Yet the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, states in part that no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. The state of Idaho doesn't do that. What can you do as a legislator to return the state and the nation to sound constitutional money?
Well, I think that the bill that they brought up already this year to back some of Idaho's money with gold and silver was a really great idea. And one of my opponents, Mark Sauter, voted against that, so he did not want to do that. It wouldn't have hurt anything, and it actually would have gone up in value. So I think that we need to get back to a gold standard. And what was the second part? Was there two parts to that question? Sorry.
The nation and the state to a sound monetary system.
Yeah, basically, I think we just need to get back to a gold standard. A gold standard, and put this. I mean, I don't know how they can stop them from printing money, because that's why we have such terrible inflation right now. It's because our dollars aren't worth anything, or very little. I shouldn't say they're not worth anything, but they're not worth very much.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, we're not going to fix any of this with monetary policy. I mean, we have to wean ourselves off of these giant government programs. That's what we have to do. That's where all this money is going. We've got to ratchet down the size of the government. As long as the government keeps growing, this money problem is never going to go away. I mean, well, it will when we go bankrupt, which I don't know how much longer we're going to keep printing money. But if we're not going to shrink the size of our government, if we can't look at 190 departments in the state of Idaho and say, we can do without that one. That was one of those things that Scott Herndon tried to do on his first term when he was down there, is he tried to get rid of this just silly, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was something about, like speaking Spanish or something, just this silly little thing. It was a really small thing, and man, they just went after him for that. But we've got to do it. We've got to shrink the size of the government, or they're just going to keep sucking us dry. I mean, what was the Boston Tea Party over? What was the percentage of taxes that they threw tea in the harbor for?
3%.
It was it wasn't 3%. It was 2% tax, and they raised it to 3%. And that 1% of taxes, our forefathers were having riots, and here we are paying 50%, some of us, in taxes, and we're just like, oh yeah, more government. Let's do more of that. We have to be able to say no.
All right, I'm going to make a comment about Mark Sauter's voting record. You can check it out on Idaho Freedom Foundation, which has already been pointed out. But also there was House Bill 421, which would create clear definitions of male, female, and related terms and clarify that gender and sex are synonymous. And that bill was actually passed into law, and Mark Sauter voted against it. So I think people need to know there's something big going on, and people that call themselves conservative, are they conservative? You have to answer that question. Anyway, it's time for closing argument, not arguments, but statements. So Jane went first, so we can go first.
All right. Well, hopefully you guys have got an impression as to how I feel about certain things, and hopefully these are things that matter to you, and hopefully you want somebody like me down there advocating for you, because that's all I want to do. I want to go advocate for you. I want to be an advocate on your behalf, as opposed to folks like Mark, who's an advocate on behalf of, just a list of corporations who could care less if you're alive or dead, as long as you pay taxes. They don't care about us at all anymore. It's a whole bunch of people like Mark down there. I don't know if anybody saw, I ask a lot of questions, so I like to be interactive, I like to ask questions. I don't know if anybody saw the chart that showed what the makeup of the state house was down in, or the House and Senate down in Boise, but it's like, it looks like it's 75-ish% Republican and 25-ish% Democrat. But then when you go to the Idaho Freedom Foundation and you look at how people actually vote, it's not. I mean, we're barely at 50-50. So these people, you know, a lot of people call them rhinos, you know, sure, call them rhinos. I use shorthand, they're just liars. They just lie to you. You know, I'm sick of being lied to. I hope you're sick of being lied to. You know, I'm not the most polished person sometimes when it comes to giving a message, but I am giving you the truth. So hopefully on May 21st you'll vote for me. Thank you.
If elected, my aim is to represent the liberty-loving constitutional conservatives and all of the people of District 1. My platform includes protecting Idaho's children and families, fighting to keep our First and Second Amendment rights, and stopping the flow of illegal aliens that are invading the country. I'm not aggressive, but I am assertive, and I know how to work well with others. I would ask for your trust and your vote in the May 21st primary. And because I believe that there are a lot of believers here, I would also ask for your prayers, because we are in a spiritual battle. Please visit JaneSauterForIdaho.com for more information. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming up, and thanks for everybody for making it, and thanks Mike and the church here for allowing us to do that. And anyway, that's it. Get out and support the people you think are doing what's right, and it's important. Okay. In 2 Chronicles it says, "If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land." So, even whoever's representing us can't fix it all. We have each individual have a responsibility to do this, and there is a way to fix it. But anyway, that's it. Thank you for